President Biden here in Europe for that emergency NATO summit over Russia's war in Ukraine. The invasion began 1 month ago today. President Biden rallying the allies to remain united, announcing new sanctions against Russian lawmakers, oligarchs, and Russian defense companies, committing $1 billion in aid to help in this humanitarian crisis, money for food, water, and medicine, and saying the U.S. will now welcome 100,000 refugees to America. The president was pressed on how the U.S. would respond if Russia uses chemical weapons in Ukraine, and he was pressed on China, what he said about his warning to President Xi. President Biden and leaders of 30 other NATO countries coming together, U.S. officials reporting the mood was sober and resolute. President Biden coming before cameras saying NATO has never been more united and that Vladimir Putin is getting exactly the opposite of what he intended. Ukraine's President Zelensky addressing the leaders from Ukraine with a new plea for more weapons, warning Russia does not intend to stop in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russian forces firing rocket launchers in the streets of Mariupol, the dramatic new video here tonight shown on Russian state television. And then late today, what Russia is now claiming about that city, claiming they are set to take control. A driver in that city capturing the devastation. And Ukraine claiming it has now hit a Russian warship in the occupied port city of Bryansk. And tonight, our exclusive look at NATO exercises being conducted along the Poland-Belarus border. They are calling it a show of force tonight. And here in Poland, where millions of Ukrainians are fleeing from their country, that new number, 4.3 million Ukrainian children now displaced by this war. President Biden will be here in Poland tomorrow, and of course, we have it all covered tonight, beginning with our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, traveling with the president in Brussels.
Tonight, 1 month into this war, the Ukrainian Navy claiming a victory, saying they destroyed this massive Russian cargo ship not far from the besieged city of Mariupol, disrupting Vladimir Putin's plans to resupply his forces with tanks and weapons. This verified video circulating online shows a ship burning in a port, while up north, the Ukrainian military keeping Russian troops at bay 35 miles outside the capital city of Kyiv. There, President Volodymyr Zelensky virtually addressing Western allies gathered for the emergency NATO summit in Brussels. NATO has yet to show what the alliance can do to save people, he said. And then this plea. Give us 1% of all your aircraft, 1% of all your tanks, 1%. Anti-ship weapons, means of air defense. Is it possible to fight such a war without it? World leaders today did not announce any new shipments of tanks or planes to Ukraine, but on the world stage, President Biden did insist military equipment is flowing into Ukraine right now. He says NATO allies united in the face of Russian aggression is what will ultimately defeat Putin.
Putin was banking on NATO being split. NATO has never been more united than it is today. Putin is getting exactly the opposite what he intended to have as a consequence of going into Ukraine.
And if Russia uses chemical weapons, as U.S. officials fear they could, President Biden delivering this warning.
We would respond. We would respond if he uses it. The nature of the response would depend on the nature of the use.
We asked exactly what that would mean.
If chemical weapons were used in Ukraine, would that trigger a military response from NATO?
It would trigger a response in kind. Whether or not you're asking whether NATO would cross, we'd make that decision at the time.
President Biden also discussing his conversation with Chinese President Xi, urging him not to help Russia in any way.
I made no threats, but I pointed out the number of American and foreign corporations have left Russia as a consequence of their barbaric behavior. Because I think that China understands that its economic future is much more closely tied to the West than it is to Russia. And so I'm hopeful that he does not get engaged.
And tonight, the president standing firm in his decision not to send American troops into Ukraine. We asked him if Putin is taking advantage of that.
Sir, you've made it very clear in this conflict that you do not want to see World War III. But is it possible that in expressing that so early that you were too quick to rule out direct military intervention in this war? Could Putin have been emboldened knowing that you are not going to get involved directly in this conflict?
No and no.
And Cecilia Vega joined us from Brussels tonight. And Cecilia, President Biden making immediate global headlines with something else he said today as well, saying he supports removing Russia from the G20.
Yeah, David, of course, that group of the world's largest economies. The president saying he brought this up in the meetings that took place behind me here today, kicking Russia out of the G20. He said if other member nations do not agree with that, the president wants to see Ukraine invited to those G20 meetings. Of course, Russia was kicked out of the smaller group, the G8, back in 2014 when it invaded Crimea. But kicking a nation out of the G20 would be unprecedented. David, clearly President Biden wants to see Putin isolated with whatever leverage remains.
Cecilia Vega leading us off from Brussels.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.